The gallery doors opened with a whisper, revealing walls adorned with paintings that had moved nations to tears. Soft orchestral music drifted through the marble halls as collectors in tailored suits and elegant gowns admired canvases valued in the millions. But tonight wasn't about them. Tonight, standing quietly in the corner beneath his own masterpiece titled The Weight of Wings, was a man whose hands had once trembled with hunger, whose studio had been a freezing garage, and whose family had once told him he was throwing his life away. Julian Cross had been disowned 15 years ago for refusing to take over his family's pharmaceutical empire. They called him foolish, reckless, ungrateful. His father erased him from the will. His mother stopped answering his calls. His siblings mocked him publicly. Yet here he stood, not broken, but transformed. The quiet storm before a reunion no one expected. If you believe in the courage to choose your own path, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and let's spread these stories of resilience together. 15 years ago, the Cross family mansion stood as a monument to wealth and legacy, towering over perfectly manicured gardens where generations of business titans had been raised. Inside the mahogany-paneled study, 23-year-old Julian Cross stood trembling before his father, Edmund Cross, whose face had turned crimson with fury. Julian had just announced he was dropping out of business school to pursue fine arts. The room fell into a suffocating silence. His mother, Victoria, covered her mouth in shock. His older brother, Marcus, laughed cruelly. His younger sister, Elise, stared at the floor. Edmund's voice cut through the air like shattered glass. "You want to paint? You want to throw away everything we've built? Then you are no longer my son." Those words echoed in Julian's chest as he walked out of the mansion that night with nothing but a duffel bag and a sketchbook. No trust fund, no safety net, no family. The iron gates closed behind him with a finality that felt like death. Julian found himself in a cramped apartment in the city's forgotten district, surviving on ramen noodles and the occasional graphic design gig. His days blurred into nights spent painting, studying light, shadow, and the human condition. He painted his pain, his loneliness, his hope. His first gallery submission was rejected. So was his second, and his third. By year 2, Julian was sleeping in his car, showering at a gym, and painting in a storage unit he rented for $50 a month. People walked past him on the street like he was invisible, just another struggling artist in a city full of broken dreams. But Julian never stopped. Something deep inside him refused to surrender, a quiet fire that whispered he was meant for this, that his suffering had purpose, that beauty could be born from anguish. Year 3 brought a turning point disguised as disaster. Julian had entered a piece titled Fractured Inheritance into a small community art show, a raw, emotional portrayal of a young man standing at closed gates. An elderly curator named Miriam Feng paused before it for nearly an hour. She saw something others had missed, not just technique, but soul. Miriam ran a modest gallery in the Arts District and offered Julian his first solo exhibition. It wasn't glamorous. The gallery was tucked between a laundromat and a pawn shop. Only 37 people attended opening night. But among them was a journalist from an independent arts magazine who wrote a piece titled The Artist Who Paints Loneliness with Hope. That article changed everything. Within 6 months, Julian's work began appearing in regional galleries. His style, haunting yet hopeful, resonated with people who had felt rejection, who had chosen difficult paths, who understood the cost of authenticity. He painted immigrants, outcasts, dreamers. His canvases became mirrors where the invisible saw themselves honored. By year 7, Julian had his first major gallery show in New York. Critics praised his emotionally devastating portrayals of human resilience. Collectors began bidding on his pieces. A painting titled The Studio of Forgotten Sons sold for $75,000. Julian wept when he received the check, not because of the money, but because it meant his voice mattered. He moved into a real studio with natural light, bought proper materials, and finally ate regular meals. Yet success didn't erase the hollow ache where his family had been. On holidays, he painted alone. On his birthday, no one from his past called. He watched from afar as his brother Marcus took over the family company, as his sister Elise married into another wealthy dynasty, as his parents aged in their fortress of legacy, never once reaching out. By year 12, Julian Cross had become a name whispered in elite art circles. His retrospective at the Guggenheim drew record crowds. A documentary filmmaker followed him for a year, capturing his process, his philosophy, his journey from garage to gallery. Museums began acquiring his work for permanent collections. Fashion houses commissioned him for collaborations. Yet Julian remained humble, often teaching free workshops in underprivileged neighborhoods, telling young artists that rejection wasn't failure, it was redirection. He established a foundation providing grants to artists from low-income backgrounds, remembering the nights he'd gone hungry. His largest painting, a 15-foot canvas titled The Weight of Wings, depicted a figure with golden wings standing at the edge of an abyss, choosing to leap. The symbolism was universal, the technique masterful, the emotion overwhelming. It toured internationally before a private collector offered $4.7 million. The art world gasped. Julian Cross, once homeless, once disowned, once invisible, had created something worth more than most people earned in a lifetime. News outlets covered the sale. His name trended globally. And in their mansion 300 miles away, the Cross family finally heard about the son they had erased. Marcus saw the article first, staring at Julian's photograph in disbelief. Elise called their mother in tears. Victoria showed Edmund, whose hands shook as he read about his son's achievements. They had convinced themselves Julian had failed, that he'd crawled back to obscurity. Instead, he had soared. The family's pharmaceutical empire was worth billions, yes, but Julian had built something they never could, a legacy of beauty, meaning, and impact that money couldn't buy. His art would outlive them all, hanging in museums long after their company became a footnote in business history. The invitation arrived in Julian's studio on a Tuesday morning, cream-colored paper with gold embossing. The Cross Family Foundation Annual Gala, black tie, Museum of Contemporary Art. Julian stared at it for nearly an hour, his coffee growing cold. He hadn't spoken to his family in 15 years. This wasn't a personal reconciliation. He knew that. This was a public event where the prestigious Cross family name needed to appear complete, especially now that one of their own had achieved international fame. His first instinct was to throw it away, but something stopped him. Not anger, not vindictiveness, but a quiet realization that he no longer needed their approval. He had found his worth elsewhere. Perhaps seeing them again would finally close a chapter that had remained painfully open. Julian accepted. On the night of the gala, he dressed simply, a tailored black suit, no designer labels, no ostentatious jewelry. He didn't arrive in a helicopter or limousine. He took a taxi, walking up the museum steps alone as flashbulbs erupted around him. Photographers recognized him immediately. "Mr. Cross, over here! How does it feel to have your work displayed here?" Inside, the museum's grand hall shimmered with chandeliers and champagne, Wealthy donors mingled beneath contemporary masterpieces, including 3 of Julian's paintings on loan from collectors. He walked through the crowd, feeling strangely detached, an observer in a world that had once rejected him. Then he saw them. His family stood near the silent auction tables, a portrait of perfection. Edmund's hair had grayed, but his posture remained commanding. Victoria wore diamonds that caught the light. Marcus had his father's stern expression. Elise looked elegant but fragile. They hadn't noticed him yet, still playing their roles, shaking hands, smiling for cameras. When their eyes finally met, time seemed to fracture. Edmund's champagne glass paused halfway to his lips. Victoria's polite smile faltered. Marcus straightened, recognition washing over his face. Elise gasped softly. Julian walked toward them, not with anger or triumph, but with the calm of someone who had already won the only battle that mattered, the one within himself. "Hello," Julian said simply. The word hung in the air, weighted with 15 years of silence. Edmund opened his mouth, closed it, then finally spoke, his voice rougher than Julian remembered. "Julian, you came." "I did." There was no embrace, no tears, no dramatic apology, just 4 people standing in a museum, surrounded by art and strangers, confronting the ghost of a choice made long ago. Victoria reached out tentatively. "Your work, it's everywhere. We had no idea you'd become so—" She trailed off, unable to finish. "So what?" Julian asked gently. "Successful? Or were you going to say, so right about following my path?" Marcus stepped forward, his corporate confidence cracking. "We were wrong. I was wrong. I laughed at you that night. I've regretted it ever since." Elise wiped her eyes carefully, preserving her makeup. "I wanted to call you so many times. I was too ashamed." Julian looked at each of them, seeing not the titans who had cast him out, but flawed, aging humans who had made a terrible mistake and lived with it. He felt something unexpected, not forgiveness exactly, but release. "I didn't come here for an apology," Julian said. "I came because I wanted you to see that choosing my truth didn't destroy me. It created me. Everything you see in those paintings on these walls, that's what rejection built. That's what loneliness taught me. That's what choosing art over approval gave the world." Edmund's eyes glistened, a sight Julian had never witnessed. "I'm proud of you, son. I should have said it 15 years ago." Julian nodded slowly. "Maybe. But I don't need you to say it now. I'm proud of myself. And that's enough." He turned, walking back through the gallery, past his own paintings, past the life he'd built from nothing. Outside, the night air felt cleaner. As Julian descended the museum steps, his phone buzzed with messages from young artists thanking him for his foundation grants, for his workshops, for proving that authentic creativity could survive in a world obsessed with profit. He smiled, realizing that the family who had disowned him had inadvertently given him the greatest gift, the necessity to build his worth from the inside out, to define success on his own terms, to transform pain into purpose. If this story resonated with you, please comment, "I choose my truth," and share this message with someone who needs to hear it today. Julian Cross never returned to the mansion. He didn't need to. He had built his own home in the hearts of everyone his art had touched, and that legacy, invisible yet eternal, was worth more than any inheritance could ever be.